Hello and welcome to Badgercam RC. In this week's episode we're going to be carrying on with our Morston semi-scale Norfolk crab boat build made by Hughes Aircraft Kits. In last week's episode we painted the hull and had a few disasters. In this week's episode we're going to be finishing off the build and getting this thing ready to go out on the water. A few things we're going to do in this episode are install the last of the electrics in the front and add the steering linkage in the back so the rudder can move, as well as glue on the last little bits that come with the kit. There's not many of them, and do a few little finishing touches to make this boat my own. In between this episode and the last episode I've gone around and touched up all the paintwork on the model. Probably going to have to go back and revisit it again, but really tidied it up from the state that it was in last time, and I think having 3 or 4 days off from building this has left me feeling a bit more refreshed after the stress from the last one. Another little bit I've done is I've added the boat's registration number. This was simply done by applying some pre-bought vinyl stickers, made up my own code and number. Anyway, without further ado, let's get this thing finished, shall we? The first thing I'm going to do is glue these last pieces that come with the kit in place. Just the boathouse cabin door goes in there, and we've got a nice little wheel to go in there. Now, a few of you may have noticed I've glued the windows in the front in place already. The windows in the back I'm not going to glue in just yet. One, I wanted to show you people how the windows fit in, which is fairly simple and straightforward, but the main reason for this is these parts are all going to be glued in with super glue, which has a nasty habit of reacting with clear plastic. So I'm going to glue them in and leave them for a good while to make sure any vapours have dissipated by the time I come to fit them, so I'm not going to get it fogging up afterwards and wasting all of my hard work. So right then, let's get them fitted. This is probably one of the simplest things I'll ever show on YouTube. Simply get hold of the piece, little bit of glue. I don't want too much, but I don't want to be scrimping with it. Place it down where you want it and push it up to hold, and there we go. Nice easy final bit to the step there. Now to do the same with the steering wheel. I've already dry fitted these, so I have a good idea of where I want them to go. Just a case of applying a little bit of glue to them and slotting them into place like so. There we go. Now the next thing to install is the throttle. If I can get this round by that. This is probably going to be the most difficult thing to install. It's only a thin piece and it wants to be stuck to a vertical surface. But let's see how we go. I think that's the correct position. There we go. Not sure if it should be there or on top of the dashboard, but I'm from Birmingham. I've probably only seen the sea about 5 times in my life. Anyway, with that on a little bit easier than I thought, let's move on. Now, moving on to the back of the ship, I've made myself a little name plaque. Decided to call it Blenny, after the little fish that live in the rock pools. One of the few fish I've got first-hand experience of rock pooling as a kid. So what I'm going to do, slap that on the back. All this is made from is a thin piece of mahogany. I penciled the name on and went over with Warhammer paints before varnishing it in place. I'm just got to work out a nice little patch to put that on and glue it on. From here on out, other than the windows, that's everything that comes with the kit. All these little bits and pieces here I've made myself to add on, and they're not exactly rocket science either. So a little bit of super glue. Line it up as best as I can by eye. There we go. Makes the boat look owned at least. Never realised this, but before you name a boat you have to submit all the names for approval. Just I thought you could name whatever you wanted, but apparently the people who own the ports and harbours, they Don't want any crazy names. Anyway, moving on. Now another little thing I'm going to add are a few strips of wood down the side. On lobster and crab boats, where the pots come out of the water, the pots tend to keep hitting the side of the boat. This takes all the paint off and makes the boats look tatty. So what a lot of the boat owners seem to do, from my extensive Google Images research, is they have a load of little square bits of wood screwed onto the side of the hull. I imagine these are cheaper to replace than having a hull completely redone. So I'm going to put this detail onto my scale model just to make it look a little bit more authentic. These bits of wood are simply scrap from the rubbing and spray rails. I'm going to put them on off camera because I'm going to need both hands. I'm only going to get one shot of putting these on properly, and yeah, I don't want to mess it up at this stage of the build. And that's the last of these bits on. It's nice to just add those little bits of detail that you know are there for functionality on the real ships. I do want to add a lobster pot winch on the one side, but I've got to get better reference pictures of them, and there's so many varieties of it, and I need to get some metal too. But anyway, that's that bit done. Next bit to add is a bit of a strange one, but I want it to be on there. I've cut off a small chunk of rubber, and I'm going to put it around the nose just to avoid unnecessary scuffing and scraping on the model. The ends aren't glued, so they're not going to stick. I just want to try and tack it on the end, get it level. That looks level to me. And once that's got a bit of a purchase, I'm going to go back with some epoxy to glue this on more permanently. I just want to tack it in place at the moment, so it's there and I can remember to do it. So mental note, buy more epoxy. So little tack there. Little tack there. And I'll just move it down. That's that pin to there. Little piece onto that. That's that bit done. Flip it round. If we can get it in camera shot. Liking the character of this now though, as it's little details are really what make a kit, I'll find. So pin that in. That's that purchased. Sort of. Might need to hold it for a few seconds. But yeah, nice big old bump thing at the front. It's not going to do any major good if I drive into the side of a ship going full pelt, but it will stop little knocks and abrasions off the side of the boating lake from chipping the ends. It's always the ends that seem to take the absolute beating. The sides just get a couple of scratches on. Anyway, now all the easy sticking stuff's done. Moving on. Now the next thing I'm going to add is a couple of aerials. Very carefully drilled a couple of holes in the top, and as daft as it sounds, what I'm using for the aerials, as you can see, these are unused ones. COVID tests, I ain't being funny, but ever seen a more perfect out of the sterile container aerial before. I'm tempted to order more. I don't care how much they cost. I need these scale aerials, and I need loads of them before this pandemic's over, and I can't get hold of any more of them. Anyway, simply going to push them into position through the pre-drilled holes now. A little drop of super glue to hold them in. And perfecto. They bend too rather than break. Just when these companies are out of like business for COVID, they scale aerial business, just thousands of them, please. Give me a link to buy like a pack of 50, please. Best thing to happen from this whole blooming pandemic. Scale aerials, they're everywhere. Anyway, excitement over. Moving on. Now the next bit we're working on is a radar dome. Got some green stuff on standby because I'm going to pack that with that after it's done. It's simply the top of a 2-part epoxy resin stuff that I had, and it had run out, and that there is the choice cut after cutting down lots of bits of the nozzle for an applicator for some silica, and yeah, put the two together, you got yourself a nice little radar array. So I'm going to pack the top and bottom of them with a bit of green stuff just to give it something better to bind, and glue that onto the roof. And that's the radar dome underneath, just so you can see what I've done. I've used the green stuff simply to line it up and make it square easier, and filling in the void in the middle gives it a much better surface to glue onto. Though using a Dremel to flatten it out, it actually kind of melted and went inwards, which was quite nice, as it will give it a better surface to glue to than I thought would be there. Anyway, if I can get myself unstuck, there we go. That's simply going to go on the top around there, but I'm going to turn the camera off and line that up as I want it to go on perfect first time. Now, I'm not sure what these things are. They seem to come with servos, and they make perfect little rope guides, or whatever these things are. I've already put one onto the front of the ship, and I'm going to put one here and one here on the back of the ship. If anyone knows what they are, let me know in the comments, as I'm always game for learning, but sometimes it's difficult to search nautical terms when you're like the bit that the rope goes round. There's about 1 million bits that the rope go around. Anyway, going to get on with gluing them. Another bit, I'm not exactly sure what it represents, but having stared at tons and tons of pictures of these things, a lot of them seem to have these little squares of metal on the side down by the waterline. Might be some sort of electrical or plumbing or bilge pump thing, but I'm going to put one on each side anyway, and be damned with it. Just a little sheet of metal, easy enough to do. This is a piece of aluminium can, so I'm going to glue that on. A few other little bits I've been working on is a fishing rod. It's not exactly the best fishing rod that's ever been made, but simply a bit of heated up and stretched spur off an old plastic model kit, and then I think that little bit's something off a tank I had left over in the bits box. It's more of an impression of a fishing rod than anything, but it'll look good on the back. I've tried to make a few of these, but the first one came out perfect, and the ones afterwards have been a bit bendy and a bit too thin. But I'm going to carry on and try and make a few more of these. Not sure where they're going to go yet. I'll probably add them on later. Another thing I've been working on is a fire extinguisher. This is it drying at the moment. Again, a bit more of an impression of a fire extinguisher, if it will focus, than anything. It's just a little piece of aluminium tubing, but again, a little bit off an old tank model stuck on the top. That's going to go in above the door. So I'm going to glue that in now, and then I think it'll be time to put the windows on next. As you can see, the boathouse is starting to look a little bit more lived in. Another thing I've added, just that little square there for the ignition port. They always seem to have a little black metal ignition port with a weird kind of key on a lanyard. So just a bit of an impression of it. It will look good from far away. Now finally, moving on to the windows. Windows are fairly easy to install, but I didn't want to make a mess of them by using super glue. I've used a bit of Evo stick on that fire extinguisher, so I don't have to wait another day for it to dry. All I'm simply doing is a little tack of glue around the edges. Not much, doesn't need much there. They're really tight fitting anyway, so glue's more there just for show. I simply place them in and push them into place. They'd stay in if you just pushed them in, to be honest with you. The thing to watch out for when putting the windows in is if you've added a little bit too much paint, the fitting's quite exact. So what you might have to do is go around these edges with a sharp knife and just take off a little bit of paint. As you can see here, there's a little bit had to be removed before that's gone in. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to move around and do exactly the same as I've just done there, and put the other 3 windows in. And that's the windows fitted. Now, before I get a little bit too carried away with the scale details, it's time to start fitting a few of the electric components, just to finish this off and start to get the thing moving. First thing to install is a Hobbywing 1060. I tend to use these for all my models just because they're waterproof and fairly cheap. A few things I've got to do though. I've got to change the adapter, as I don't use Tamiya connectors, and give it a quick check to make sure that these wires are in the motor in the right way. I think the blue is the negative and the yellow is the positive on these, but sometimes the polarity on these is the opposite to what you'd think it would be, or it seems to go into the controller that way. Anyway, so I'm going to get the soldering iron out and start working on this. Just trial fitting a few of the bits in there. As you can see, it's going to be very tight. What I've done when attaching the ESC though, just in case the polarities are wrong, I've used a combi block rather than soldering it. This is just for ease of switching later on. I've done it before where I've wired them up, soldered them, and then gone, oh bugger, I've put them on the wrong way around. Hopefully it's on the right way around, and then all I'll have to do is remove that and solder them on permanently afterwards. Not sure everything's going to go in the front though. It's very, very tight in there. I get the feeling it's going to be a bit of a bird's nest on top of a battery. But we'll see if we can tidy that up with the other bits and pieces in. Next up, it's time to add the receiver. This is the receiver I'm going to be adding, a FlySky BS4. Just going to get on and fit this, and doing a whole video on how to bind these to the FlySky GT5s. But safe to say it's a fairly simple procedure. Now I've gone away and I've bound the receiver to the controller. Now it's simply a case of plugging the rudder servo into slot 1. Now I've got an extension running down the side of the boat, but even with that I literally have, I don't know if you can even see it in there, I'll try and move the camera, about 2 inches of play. I think it's pretty futile to try and show you me plugging this in, and it's not going to be of much use. Needless to say, the next few minutes are going to be a bit of a struggle, but it shouldn't be nothing too hard. So I'm going to plug that in, and then the thing should start to be almost ready for a life out on the ocean waves. After some faff with some long nose pliers, the servo is ready to connect. Now I know it's going to be a bit of a bugger to attach the piano wire, as there's even less room in that area than there is in the front. And I've got big horrible hands that won't fit into these sort of things. So right, it's time to open up the back hatch and have a go at the rudder linkage. No fancy push and pull rods in this. Simply made myself a D-shaped piece of piano wire. Now I've took the arm off the rudder because it's simply going to be easier to fit it onto there rather than try and force it around. It's going to need a little bit of tuning. I don't think I'll get it right the first time, and I might need to cut a little bit off the rudder arm, but see how we go, see what we get. A little bit of faff later and a few snips off of the rudder arm, which I accidentally chopped the wrong side off of and had to flip upside down, but you never saw anything. It now has steering. I think that's literally the smallest possible space that you can fit a standard servo and rudder arm though. It's tight. It's really blooming tight. The important thing is that it works regardless. So I think with that, all there is left to do is screw the hatch on and fill up the bath and test how it's working. So I'm going to go do that. And this is being float tested. Had to check there weren't any leaks after all that hard work that had gone into it. Fortunately, there's not been a single leak, and this has been floating in the bath now for well over an hour, which is an expected kind of run time for most RC boats. Everything in there works. It's difficult to film though. Sounds a little loud, but that's just the acoustics on the bath. And I can't get it to full speed where it starts to stabilise. Otherwise it will shoot straight into the wall. But the steering works, and the forwards and backwards works. It's quite nice to see it out on the water after all this time. It's really starting to look the part though. I'm going to try and get the camera down for a bit of a more scale shot. But it definitely looks like the sort of boat you'd see kicking around in a harbour port on holiday. And now we're ready to start a life on the open waves. I think it's time to call it for this build series. There's still a few little bits and pieces to do with it though, and I will be covering those in future videos. For one, I want to weather the whole thing, make it look like it's spent a life at sea. I think that'll make it look a lot more realistic than it does at the moment. But for the £40 I paid for this kit, I'm really quite chuffed with that. Easy to build, fun to build, A little bit tight when it comes to fitting the electrics and the RC stuff, and you do need to have a bit of a think, have a bit of experience to put those in, but it's nothing too bad really. With a few scale details, I think the ship really comes to life. I'm loving the cabin, looking quite homely, looking quite fit for purpose. Added a little first aid kit on the side, just in case something happens. I've got a scale bloke coming as well to go in the back. There's a few more plans for this ship though. It's not just going to be a drive around and do not much else. I've already pre-drilled, just see it just down there in the corner, a hole for another servo. I intend on fitting a camera in the back. I was going to do that as part of this series, but I think I'm going to leave it and do it a little bit later, as I need to get a smaller servo. The GoPros at the moment are coming up way up here, and I want to get a smaller servo and bring it down to about here, so you can get a nice first person view of driving the boat and a nice first person view over the side of the over the sides of the decks. See if I can do some river tours when I go out to some nice places in the summer. Nice to have it chugging along and looking at the banks. Maybe try and film a little bit of wildlife with it. Might even camouflage it up actually. Just put a little ghillie suit on the top of it. But anyway, as always, thank you for watching, and thank you for joining me on this boat build journey. Until next time, look after yourselves and have a good one. Goodbye.